Hello, my name is Colby Wilson. I will be presenting our program on behalf of the Dream Team. To get started, we initialized various functions, our int random number generator. Uh, we also initialize our area code parsing function, which takes the destination phone number as a parameter. We also have calculate service rate that takes the integer value of the area code as a parameter. And then we have a Boolean function, which returns a true or false to check whether the phone number, the destination phone number, which is passed in as a parameter, is valid or not. So skipping past int main for now, we'll take a look at those functions a little bit more in depth. So we'll begin with our Boolean validate phone number function. This takes in the destination phone number as a string, as a parameter. And what this function does is validates the number entered by the user. If it returns a false value, then the loop in the int main will cause it to continue, or cause the program to continue to ask the user to enter a valid number, and it will continue to prompt the user to enter a valid number until a valid number is entered. The way that we check to see if the number is valid or not is what we do is first, based on our format, the length of the string should be 12 characters. So we check to see if the entered input that's passed as the destination phone number is in fact 12 characters long. And if it is, it'll kick into this for loop. We iterate through 12 times, and for each character in the string, we are saving that character into this character digit, and then we are checking to see whether or not that digit variable is actually a digit or not. So we use the isDigit function on the digit character variable, and if it is equal to false and the digit is also not equal to a dash, then we will return false. So that means that the number or the string entered is not a valid number. And if x is equal to 3 or x is equal to 7, these would be in the phone number where the dashes would normally go, according to our format. So if there is not a dash in these spots, then we're going to return false. So the way that this works is if you enter any string, it's checking to make sure that what is entered are actually numbers and not letters. And once it gets to the dashes, it's making sure that the dashes are in the right place. If all of that works, then it will kick down to the rest of the function where we use the area code parsing function on the destination phone number. And what this does, we'll see in a minute, is it converts the area code from the string into an integer value. So we take that integer value and store it into our area code variable. And if the area code is equal to any of the area codes that we're using for this program, then it will return true. Otherwise, it returns false. And if everything checks out, then the Boolean validate phone number function will return true, allowing the rest of the program to continue. Otherwise, it'll prompt false, causing a loop of asking the user to continue to put in a valid number. Our next function is a random number generator. This is used to generate a or simulate a call connection time with an upper limit of 180 minutes. So we set that as our max, and then we use the srand function to get a random time between 0 and our max 180. That is then saved into our integer variable random number, and the random number variable is returned. Our next function is the area code parsing function. This takes the destination phone number string as an input, and then what it will do is we actually use the .substring function to look at just the first 3 characters of that string, and then we take those first 3 characters and save that into another variable, a string variable, a_code, short for area code. And then what we do now is we want to take that, now that we have just the first 3 numbers of our string, we want to convert that into an integer that represents our area code. So we use stoi to do that, and then we return the integer value of the area code. Now it's important that we return the integer value of the area code because it's what's going to help us calculate our service rates, which is our final function. We have our basic rate of 0.02, so 2 cents per minute, and then we have a initialized but not, or a declared but not initialized float variable service rate. And what we do is we will check to see if the area code is 405, check to see if it is 520 or 550, and check to see if it is 620 or 650. Each of these will then assign the service rate based on the PDF instructions. So the basic rate is 2 cents per minute. If it's a local call, so if the area code is 405, then the service rate is equal to the basic rate and the service rate is returned. Otherwise, if it's the 500 area codes, then it's the base rate is multiplied by 1.25, and then that service rate is returned. And if it's the 600 area codes, then the base rate is multiplied by 1.75, and then that service rate is returned. What we'll do now is we'll actually run the program. Let me open the terminal real quick, and then we'll do .exe, and we'll see that it runs. We'll go ahead and maximize it, and we'll see exactly how this works. So we see that it asks to enter a 10-digit phone number separated by dashes. Only the following area codes will be accepted: are 405, 520, 550, 620, and 650. And then it gives an example. So if we type in following the example, then we'll see that that works. We get the number of calls thus far made printed, as well as the destination phone number printed and the connection time. If we try entering a invalid number, so let's say we do the area code wrong, then we see that it'll continue to ask us to enter a valid number. So we can try again. Let's try using a valid area code but an invalid number. So we'll kind of flip them around. So that doesn't work either. We'll try again using the valid area code, and we'll put like a letter in there, and then we'll finish it out with some numbers, and we see that it still doesn't work. So it has to be in the exact format that we specify, and then it also has to have one of those proper area codes. So we'll enter in this one. We'll enter in a few more here to get to the end. So as you can see, the number increases for the number of calls that have been entered. We'll call that 405 number again, and call it a few times. And we'll call the 650 number again, and then we'll call 620. Let's see, we got one more. Okay, so we see that once all of our phone calls have been made, well, as we go through, let's look through them all. We see that each one of them has a different connection time. This is simulated through the random number generator. So we see that the random number generator function is working as intended. And then when we come down, we see our call statistics at the very end. This one will give us the total number of calls served. So we served 10 total calls. And then it will tell us the number of local calls and long distance calls. So the local calls are any calls that start with the 405 area code. So as you can see, we have 2 here, 3, 4, and then 5. So yes, we have all of them. And then we have our 5 long distance area code calls. So what we now have is the total call time. So we added this to help us check our math to make sure everything was working properly. So out of all of the 10 calls, it came out to 726 minutes. with a average connection time per call of 72.6 minutes, or 60 minutes. So 73, or 72.60 minutes. And then we have our total revenue, which is for all those calls, it came to a total of $19.44. So if we minimize this now, we can look at our actual int main. If we go through, we can see how this works. So we initialize and declare a lot of variables, and then we start by prompting the user to enter 10 phone calls. Uh, so we have our cout to get our destination phone number, and then what we do is we check to see if that's valid, and then while valid is equal to false, so we call upon the validate phone number function that's going to return a Boolean true or false value. We store that into a variable valid, and while valid is equal to false, what will happen is it will continue to ask the user the same thing that it did initially, and getting the input of the destination phone number, and then we check the validation using the validation phone number function again and store it to valid. So valid is constantly being updated every time a new user input is put in and saved to user phone or destination phone number. And as soon as the validate phone number function returns a true value, it kicks out of this while loop. Next thing is we are going to get the random connection times for phone calls. So we use the random number generator. And then we are also going to increment the total call time and assigning that to our total call time variable. And we're taking that connection time. So every time a new random number is generated and saved to connection time, that is added and summed to our total call time variable. What we then do is we use the area code parsing function on the destination phone number to retrieve and store that area code integer in our area code variable, and then we calculate their service rates for specific area codes using that variable. So if the area code integer is equal to 405, then we're going to increase our local counter by 1. That's how we're able to keep track of local and long distance calls. And then we can add the total amount of time. We need this total local or 405 time to keep track of how much time was spent on the local phone calls so that we can calculate the service rates appropriately. And we're going to do that for each of the types of area codes. So for the 500 area codes and the 600 area codes, because each of the area codes have different calculations that are needed, the connection times matter as well to get the proper value. So finally, we display some user information about the call. This is going to print out the number of calls, the destination phone number, and the connection time. And all of this is in that while loop that prompts the user to enter the 10 different phone calls. So while I, which is initialized as 0, is less than our constant max valid calls 10, it's going to repeat all of this. So that's how we're able to get all of this information for each of the 10 phone numbers that are entered in by the user, and then we come down out of that while loop, and then we can calculate the average connection time by casting the total call time as a double and dividing it by the max valid calls. That's going to calculate our average connection time, and then we calculate our total revenue by taking the total 405 times, so all of the randomly numerated or randomly generated numbers that have been summed together and timesing it by the base rate of 2 cents per minute. And then we are going to add that for each of the other area codes and their time spent on the call. So for the 500 area codes and the 600 area codes, we are going to multiply those by their respective rates. And then at the end, we are finally able to print out or see out all of our call statistics. Our call statistics, all of the text is left aligned, and all of our numbers are right aligned as well. to make it look nice and neat. All of that is printed to the screen, so we print out the total serviced call or served calls as our I increment counter. By this point, it should be equal to max valid calls, so it's 10. And then we have our total local calls from our local counter, our total long distance calls from our long distance counter, and then we have our total call time from our total call time variable. And then we also have our average connection time per call, which is this average connection time variable that we calculated, and our total revenue, which is our total revenue calculations from our variable up here. And that is our program. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.